In this video, we will go over the building of a new building component. Building components are a good way to calculate quantities for work items, because you can group them together by building component. As an example, let's build a strip footing component. Give the new component a class related to your classification system, a class name, and a code that helps you individualize between the similar building elements. There could be multiple types of footings, for example, so the first one is footing 1. Give it a name and concrete strength, for example, in the description, a quantity, and units. Now that the component has been created, we can start adding work items. You can either create your own work items, like I will do for rebar now, and like this, we have added a rebar. There's a slight bug still here, where you have to type in the unit afterwards to the unit screen, even though I just did it. Sorry about that. In addition to creating these work items on your own, you can of course use either the work items already in your project or work items of your reference projects if you have selected some. For example, and the description works as a search bar. Let's see if we can find the footing, concreting, and formwork already in the project. We can, and we can add them to our component like this. The same works on the reference project side. Now that you have added the work items to your component, you should figure out how their quantities are calculated based on the quantity of the building component. So, for example, the formwork will have to take into account the length of the strip footing, which is an X, that corresponds to the quantity here on the component level. And then we will need both sides of the footing for the mold work, and then we'll also require the height of the mold or the footing. With this formula I just created, I have also created variables in the variables page. And here you can give your variables names. For example, h is the height of footing, and let's say it's 0.3 meters tall. So that will be our variable and the value of the variable. Now that we have the formula and all variables have a value, we get the quantity for formwork. And this of course changes if I add more meters to the footing, we will get more quantity for the formwork. As for concreting, we're going to need the formula for volume, so length times height times width. And for the rebar, I think we could use the volume times the amount of kilos per cubic meter of concrete. Let's say 45 kilos of steel. So this is a way to create formulas. Now let's adjust the new variable, width of footing. And let's say it's a little bit wider than it is tall, so half a meter. So now we have quickly calculate the quantities for our work items, and well, the formwork and the concreting, they already have resources within them because I picked them either from the reference project or from this project, but the rebar still requires a cost. So either just type in the unit price, €0.50 per kilo, installed as a subcontracting way, or add resources like we did previously. So we could add a worker resource, and maybe we could look for a rebar. I think it was 16 millimeters, so let's add also a material resource. The worker, of course, requires a nice consumption rate. It's along these lines. And of course, the rebar will install 1 kilo per kilo of installation. Let's add a little bit of waste. And now we actually have a fully functional building component. Usually these are of course picked from a reference project, so if you need, let's say, a slab, you can just look for a slab in your reference project, copy that component to your new estimate, and then just add a quantity to it. And this is also a fine way to show that you don't necessarily need formulas, because every single work item related to the actual slab has a consumption rate of 1. So you'll be doing polystyrene insulation sheeting 1 square meter per 1 square meter of slab, and same goes for the wiring or the mesh, and the kilos of steel are calculated here on the resource level. If you have multiple, let's say, strip footings of different sizes, the easiest way is to create one component and then duplicate it. And once you duplicate a component, you get a new code for it, but of course a pedantic estimator will overwrite the automatic code and then adjust the variables here. Let's say this is slightly smaller and a little thinner as well. So just by changing the variables, you will get a completely different price for your two types of footings. As you can see, the per meter price changes, even though they are sharing exactly the same work items. This little arrow here shows that this work item is now connected to multiple components. If you go to the work items page, you can find that these work items are added together. So for example, the footing rebar here, the quantity is now grayed out because the quantity comes from two different components. And if you want to know which components it's connected to, just check the location tab, where you can find a direct link to your different types of footings. Components are a really good way to make your estimation faster, and also if you're using, for example, our BIM 3 solution, where you take quantities out of a BIM model, the components are the easiest way to connect between objects of a 3D model. And of course, you can measure quantities in the quantity takeoff window from a 2D plan and connect it to the component level, and then just use the formulas and consumption rates here to estimate or calculate the quantities for work items.